They handcuffed a 78-year-old Army veteran in broad daylight. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that he was already working with the FBI. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in Alabama. The kind of day when the sun begins to dip behind the tall pine trees, throwing long golden shadows across the cracked asphalt. Lenny Whitmore had just left Cobb's Hardware off Highway 43. A brown paper bag sat on the passenger seat of his old 2004 Ford Crown Victoria. Inside were a few screws, a quart of motor oil, and a box of nails. That car was more than just metal to Lenny. It was a memory. He'd babied it for nearly 20 years. He wore his faded U.S. Army jacket like he always did, zipper half up, elbows worn, patches sun-bleached from time and pride. It wasn't a costume. It was identity. Lenny had served 24 years in the military, including a long, hard tour in Vietnam. After retiring, he settled in Tuskegee with his wife. After she passed, he kept to himself in a quiet home just outside Reeltown. A humble life. Fixing things. Cooking simple meals. Helping the neighbor's grandson with algebra when he could. As he rolled down County Road 14 at 38 miles an hour, well below the speed limit, he noticed an old sheriff's cruiser pull onto the road behind him. He glanced at the rear view but didn't think much of it. A minute later, red and blue lights flashed. Lenny blinked, signaled, and calmly pulled into the dusty lot of a no-name gas station. Just 2 pumps and a row of folding chairs where old men argued over football and politics. 3 people were sitting outside. They turned to watch. Lenny turned off the engine, rolled down his window, and waited with both hands resting on the wheel. 2 deputies approached. Both white. One was stocky, buzz-cut, mirrored sunglasses. The other was younger, tall, jaw clenched like he was chewing invisible gum. Buzzcut leaned in, already suspicious. "You know why we pulled you over?" Lenny replied calmly, "No, sir. I wasn't speeding." "License and registration," the younger one demanded. Lenny nodded, slow and deliberate. He handed over his wallet and papers. His military ID slipped out with them. The younger deputy snatched it. "Where'd you get this car?" Buzzcut asked. "It's mine," Lenny answered quietly. "Had it nearly 20 years. Bought it from Johnson Ford up in Opelika." Buzzcut stepped back, squinted at the license plate. "You match a description," he muttered. "A description of what?" Lenny asked. "Stolen vehicle. Older black male, brown Ford." Lenny blinked. "That's all it takes now." Buzzcut stiffened. "Step out of the vehicle." "I don't see why." "I said step out." Before Lenny could finish unbuckling, the passenger door was yanked open. Rough hands pulled him out. His knees slammed the pavement. The old army jacket didn't offer much cushion. Inside the gas station lot, a chair scraped as one man stood. Another pulled out a phone. "What are y'all doing?" a woman shouted. "He didn't do anything." Step back." Buzzcut barked. "I'm filming this," she said. "You're hurting that old man." The cuffs snapped tight around Lenny's wrists. His breath was steady, but his heart wasn't. The younger deputy leaned in close, whispering something about teaching respect. Lenny looked up. Not afraid. Just disappointed. They shoved him into the back seat of the cruiser. He said nothing, only stared out the window as pine trees blurred past. His wrists ached. But his pride? It stood tall. Back at the Tallapoosa County Sheriff's Office, they walked him in through the back, not because it was protocol, but because they didn't want the public asking questions. They sat him down in a cold holding room. His wrists still bound. His knee throbbing. His dignity untouched. "Where'd you really get this?" the sergeant sneered, flipping Lenny's military ID. "eBay," he joked. That ID is real, Lenny said calmly. You can scan the barcode. I don't care if it's real. You don't talk back, the sergeant snapped. Lenny met his gaze. I served 24 years. You don't have to treat me like a damn criminal. Then act like someone who earned respect. Lenny didn't flinch. Respect isn't something you handcuff. Just then, the door creaked open. A young deputy poked his head in. Sergeant, there's a video going viral. A woman filmed the arrest. It's already hit 30,000 views. The room went still. You've got friends in high places, old man, the sergeant muttered. I've got neighbors who know my name, Lenny said. And a community that's tired of this. In the lobby, phones started ringing. Local news. Civil rights groups. Pastors reposting the video with captions like, "This is the face of Alabama justice in 2025. And then came the click of a lock turning. The sheriff himself stepped in, face red, nerves fraying. Get those cuffs off him. Now. Lenny stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. He didn't yell. Didn't curse. Just looked the sheriff in the eye. You already had your chance. You're free to go, the sheriff said. It was a mistake. No, Lenny replied. They acted on something else. Outside, reporters waited. One raised a mic. Mr. Whitmore, is it true they accused you of stealing your own car? He looked at her, then the camera. You all saw what they did. He turned and walked away. Quiet. Dignified. Jacket in hand. But the real storm hadn't even started. 2 black SUVs were already on their way to Tallapoosa County. And no one had called them. Because what the deputies didn't know was this. Lenny Whitmore was working with the FBI. You're part of the report now. Agent Reeves didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The pressure in the room was doing enough. He motioned toward the monitor behind Sheriff McMullen's desk. Pull up the cruiser cam from today. We want to see exactly how your deputies matched that description. Sergeant Crenshaw shifted in his seat, uneasy. The footage won't show much. We'll see for ourselves, Agent Marquez interrupted. 10 minutes later, the video played back in real time. There it was, Lenny's Ford Crown Victoria easing off the road, signal blinking. The deputies approaching. And then, the moment Salters yanked open the door and dragged a 78-year-old man onto the pavement. No resistance. No raised voice. Just an old man trying to brace himself from hitting the ground. Reeves paused the video. The still image hung on the screen like a quiet accusation. That man is a federal witness, he said calmly. You put cuffs on someone working with the Department of Justice. If anything had happened to him while in your custody. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Outside the office window, Deputy Gray stood watching, wide-eyed. He whispered to the deputy next to him. We're in deep, hey. But it wasn't we. Not yet. Because what happened next would decide who sank, and who pointed fingers. By the time the agent secured the footage and closed the file, half the department was in quiet chaos. Some pretended to be busy. Others just stared at their desks, hoping their names wouldn't be called. Crenshaw had locked himself in the restroom, splashing cold water on his face like it could wash away the weight of what he'd done. Agent Reeves closed the folder with a soft snap and handed it to Marquez. McMullen sat silently, shoulders sagging. A man learning in real time that denial had an expiration date. He was helping you. McMullen finally asked, voice lower now. Marquez nodded. He gave us testimony, stops he'd seen in and around Tallapoosa. Who got pulled over? Who did the pulling? Dates, badge numbers. He was keeping records for us. Nkmalen ran a hand across his forehead. Why would you put an old man in that position? Reeves didn't hesitate. Because he volunteered. Because he's tired of this town talking about change while practicing the same old habits. And because he's got the kind of memory a courtroom respects. Silence fell again. We'll need official statements from Deputy Salters and Crenshaw, Marquez said. I'll get them, Nkmalen replied. But I'll tell you now, they'll try to spin it. Reeves stood. They can spin all they want. The camera doesn't lie. Just then, a knock came at the door. Deputy Gray peeked in. Sir, someone's in the lobby. Says she wants to speak with you. Who? Nkmalen asked, already dreading the answer. Name's Brenda Lattimore, Gray said. She filmed the arrest. Reeves glanced at Marquez. She's faster than we thought. Reeves and Marquez stepped out into the lobby. Brenda Lattimore stood holding her phone like a weapon of truth. 45. Night nurse at the local hospital. Never had a reason to walk into a sheriff's office before. But today wasn't about comfort. It was about conscience. Miss Lattimore, Reeves said gently. She looked up. You hear about Mr. Whitfield? Yes. We saw your footage. We'd like to make a copy and take a statement, if you're willing. Brenda nodded, eyes flicking past them to the glass behind the counter, where deputies pretended not to listen. He's a good man, she said. Known him for years. Always waved when he passed. Always helped folks. What they did to him. That's not policing. That's bullying in uniform. We agree, Marquez said. Brenda handed over her phone. It's online already, but I saved the full file. Didn't cut anything. Reeves took the phone carefully, with respect. You may have just saved someone's life. Brenda met his eyes. He saved mine. Years ago, when my boy was real sick. Paid for our groceries when I couldn't. I told him I'd pay him back someday. She paused. Looks like I did. Outside, the crowd had started to grow. No chants yet. No bullhorns. But hand-painted signs were rising, Justice for Mr. Whitfield. Back inside, Salters sat stiffly in a chair across from Marquez, hands clasped, voice low. I didn't know who he was, he said. Crenshaw said the car matched. I just followed his lead. Marquez didn't speak right away. Then, did it make sense to you? Salters hesitated. No, not really. But I didn't think I had the right to question it. That is your job, she said. To question what doesn't make sense. He didn't argue. He just sat there. Crenshaw was next. Arms crossed. Defiant. This whole thing's been blown out of proportion. We got a tip. We acted. I didn't touch the guy. That wasn't procedure. Reeves raised an eyebrow. Procedure says you throw a 78-year-old to the pavement. He resisted. Reeves slid a still frame across the table. Lenny's face, frozen mid-fall. He didn't. Crenshaw went quiet. But outside, things weren't getting quieter. They were catching fire. That night, Brenda's video aired on the news, not just local stations. CBS. NBC, CNN. Then a push alert from the Washington Post. Vietnam vet arrested like a criminal. Another case of excessive force in the Deep South. Lenny hadn't planned to watch. He didn't like attention. Never had. But just after sunset, his neighbor's teenage son, Sean, came running over. Mr. Lenny. You're on TV. Lenny opened the door in slippers, shaking his head. I didn't do anything special. Sean grinned. No. For real. They're talking about what happened, Deshawn said. They got your name, that lady's video, everything. Lenny didn't say much. He just walked back inside, sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, and stared at the television. The news was still running the clip. There he was again, on the ground. Wrists in cuffs. Blood staining the sleeve of his faded army jacket. The anchor's voice came through smooth and cold. Leonard Whitfield, a 78-year-old Vietnam veteran, was arrested after deputies mistook him for a car thief. Federal agents have since confirmed Mr. Whitfield was cooperating in an ongoing civil rights investigation. Deshawn sat beside him, eyes wide. You were working with the FBI. Lenny turned down the volume. They came to me, he said quietly. Said they needed someone who remembered how this town used to be. Someone who's seen the same names do the same things, over and over. You never told nobody. Wasn't supposed to. Outside, headlights slowed. A car idled in the street for a moment, then rolled away. Second time that night. Lenny noticed, but said nothing. The next morning, Agents Reeves and Marquez returned to the sheriff's office, not for interviews, but with consequences. Crenshaw, suspended. Salters, under review. Sheriff McMullen, forced to face the public. At noon, he stepped up to a podium outside the station. News cameras lined the sidewalk. Brenda stood in the crowd, phone in hand. McMullen spoke like a man choosing his words with a lawyer in his ear. There was a failure in judgment. Mr. Whitfield did not deserve the treatment he received. We are cooperating fully with federal investigators. No apology. Just a bland admission wrapped in legal safety nets. The crowd wasn't buying it. A voice rang out. He's been here longer than you. Another followed. If that was your granddaddy, would you call it a failure in judgment? McMullen didn't answer. He turned and walked back inside, head down. By week's end, the full timeline was public. There had never been a suspect description that matched Lenny. No reports of a stolen car. No official tip. Crenshaw had made the call based on a vague claim that never fit the vehicle, the location, or the man. Then came the real blow. A young deputy came forward, anonymously. He told federal investigators that Crenshaw had a pattern. He pulled over elderly black drivers. Said things like, "Old ones don't fight back." Told deputies not to write full reports. Just say they looked suspicious. Move on. The department tried to spin the story. But it was too late. The damage wasn't just done, it had gone viral. The town rose. Church groups organized a march. Veterans from surrounding counties came in uniform to stand behind Lenny. People gathered outside the sheriff's office, some holding signs, others holding prayers. An elderly man walked up and laid a folded American flag on the station steps. This wasn't just about Lenny anymore. It was about every name they'd buried. Every bruise that healed in silence. Every apology that never came. Lenny didn't speak publicly. Not yet. He stood in the crowd, arms folded, jacket on. Brenda stood beside him, her phone still in hand. "You all right?" she asked. "I've been worse," he replied. "But maybe this time, they won't forget so quick." But one final push was coming. And it wouldn't come from protests, or agents, or the news. It would come from Lenny himself. The sheriff's department tried to bury the heat. But it was too late for silence. The internet doesn't have a rewind button. Once people saw a 78-year-old veteran thrown to the pavement like garbage, the narrative had changed, and it wasn't changing back. National outlets circled. Podcasts dissected the footage. On morning TV, a retired military colonel broke down in tears. "We're watching our elders, our soldiers, treated like criminals by the very people sworn to protect them. Letters flooded in. People Lenny had never met sent messages. Photos of their grandfathers. Stories of their own. Some just wrote, "I'm sorry. We saw what they did to you. You didn't deserve that." Inside the department, the air grew thick. Salters stopped showing up. Officially, he was on leave. Unofficially, he was hiding. Word spread that he tried to save himself. Told Internal Affairs he didn't agree with Crenshaw's actions. But the video showed the truth. He stood there. He watched. He helped. Crenshaw. Fired. No ceremony. No farewell. Just a letter and a warning. Federal charges possible. McMullen called another press conference. This one meant to soften the blow. It didn't work. He stood stiff in a suit that didn't fit the moment. This department is committed to reviewing its practices. We will conduct audits and retraining. A voice from the crowd cut through. That ain't an apology. Another followed. You didn't fire him because it was wrong. You fired him because you got caught. McMullen didn't argue. He just looked down, wishing the ground would swallow him whole. Through it all, Lenny stayed quiet. He didn't want cameras. He didn't want a spotlight. But the pressure was rising. Reporters camped outside his house. Neighbors dropped off food. Local pastors came with prayers and silent gratitude. Finally, after a week of silence, Lenny said yes. Not to the networks. Not to social media. To his church. One room. Folding chairs. No stage. No lights. Just the people who knew him long before the rest of the world ever cared. And this time, Lenny had something to say. Lenny stepped up to the pulpit in his Sunday jacket, not the army one this time, and adjusted the microphone with steady hands. No notes. No script. Just memory. I've been pulled over more times than I can count, he began. They see an old black man behind the wheel of a decent car, and suddenly it's a problem. The room was still. Heads nodded. I've been called every name you can imagine. I've been searched, questioned, pushed, told to keep quiet. But never in my life had I been thrown to the ground like I didn't matter. Like I was a threat. Like I was nothing. His voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It just carried. I fought for this country. And when I came back, I had to fight again, just to be seen as a man. Still, I didn't ask for this spotlight. But maybe it's time we stop pretending it's just a few bad apples. Maybe it's the whole tree that needs pruning. No applause. No shouts. Just silence. Listening. Then Lenny closed with a single sentence. If they think I'm too old to stand up, they haven't been watching. A teenager from the choir caught the speech on video. Posted it online. It caught fire. Again. But this time, it didn't just stir local hearts. It shifted pressure upward. To the State House. A local legislator announced a bill requiring mandatory body cameras in all law enforcement agencies. No exceptions. A coalition of veterans demanded civilian oversight boards for police conduct. Community forums were scheduled. Policies were questioned. Assumptions too. Some officials tried to say it was overblown. That it was just an unfortunate misunderstanding. But when people looked at that frozen image, an old man, face down on pavement, blood on his sleeve, their words felt paper-thin. Still, Lenny had one more thing to say. And this time, he wasn't letting anyone else speak for him. 2 weeks after the arrest, Lenny sat across from journalist Tara Mendel in a modest studio in Birmingham. No lights. No polished graphics. Just 2 chairs, a plain table, and a glass of water. Tara had asked him several times before. He'd always said no. But now, With the noise growing louder, he realized it was time. Not for a soundbite. Not through agents. Not through Brenda's camera. His voice. On his terms. Tara pressed record. "Okay, if we just start?" she asked gently. Lenny nodded. "Go ahead." She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Mr. Whitfield, the country saw what happened to you. But I want to know, what did it feel like, in that moment?" He paused. Eyes resting on the table. "You ever been embarrassed, for no reason?" he asked softly. "Not because you did something wrong. Just because someone decided you didn't belong." Tara didn't answer. She let the silence breathe. "That's what it felt like," he said. "Humiliation. Not just for the handcuffs. Not even for the way they talked to me. But for what it said, about what this country still thinks of men like me." "You mean veterans?" she asked. Lenny looked up. Calm. Clear. "I mean black men," he said. "Black veterans. Black grandfathers. Black men who don't smile when they're told to. I served this country. Buried brothers overseas. Took orders I didn't agree with. And I came home to segregated bathrooms and second-class silence." Tara nodded. Slowly. "People keep saying thank you for your service like it's a shield," he continued. "But when they see me walking down the street, that shield don't mean nothing." She asked him, carefully, "Were you angry?" "No," Lenny said. "I was tired. Tired of being asked to prove I belong here. I'm 78 years old. I don't have time to be angry. But I do have time to be honest." Tara leaned in slightly. "What do you want people to take away from all this?" Lenny looked directly into the camera. "First time all day. I want them to stop acting like this stuff just happens. It's not a glitch. It's the system working exactly how it was built. And we can't fix it if folks keep acting surprised every time it does what it was designed to do." He folded his hands on the table. Voice steady. "A little softer now. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for memory. I want people to remember what they saw, when the headlines fade. Remember who spoke up. Who stayed silent. Who made excuses. Because this ain't just about me." Another silence. Heavy. Necessary. Then Tara asked, "You ever think about leaving?" Lenny let out a quiet smile. Small. Real. Barely. "This is my home. I got my wife buried here. I got trees I planted 30 years ago. Why should I be the one to leave?" He looked off camera, then back again. "But if folks think I'm gonna stay quiet next time, they picked the wrong vet." The interview aired that night. Unedited, unfiltered. No music. No dramatic cuts. Just words. And the weight of them. And something shifted. People who had stayed silent, unsure, skeptical, they found their voice. Even some in law enforcement reached out. Quietly. Apologies. Regrets. Conversations they'd never had before. Because for once, they couldn't say they didn't know. It wasn't a tidal wave, but it was real. At Sunday service the following weekend, Pastor Jensen paused before the final hymn. The pews, fuller than usual, seemed to hold their breath. "We don't need a martyr," he said, his voice measured. "We need to listen to the living. Mr. Whitfield is here today, and I think we ought to listen." The church stood as one. Lenny didn't rise. Didn't wave. He simply tipped his head, hands folded in his lap, not for attention, but because he was still here. But before the service could end, there was one more surprise waiting for him. One that came from someone he never expected. 3 days after the interview aired, Lenny's front door creaked open just after noon. He sat on his porch, as he did every day, sipping coffee from a ceramic mug his late wife had made in 1992. He liked the quiet. It gave him room to think. But that day, he wouldn't be alone for long. A sedan, no flashing lights, no news vans, rolled up his driveway. A modest grey Nissan with out-of-state plates. A man stepped out. Late 20s. Neatly trimmed hair. Tan slacks. A navy blue polo with the Department of Justice logo stitched on the chest. Lenny narrowed his eyes, but didn't move. If someone came all that way, they could do the walking. The man approached, extending his hand. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm Curtis Daniels. I work out of the DC office." Lenny didn't take the hand, not out of rudeness, but out of habit. "What brings you down here?" he asked, his voice steady. Daniels seemed genuinely nervous. He cleared his throat. I just wanted to deliver something personally, and say thank you." The man reached into his bag and pulled out a framed letter. Thick paper, the seal of the Department of Justice at the top. Lenny accepted it slowly, his brow furrowing as he read each line. His gaze dropped to the bottom of the letter, the U.S. Attorney General's signature. It wasn't a medal. It wasn't a trophy. It wasn't for show. It was an official letter acknowledging Lenny's assistance in a multi-agency civil rights investigation. An investigation that now spanned 4 counties, 3 departments, and over a dozen officers under review. Daniels spoke softly. "They're listening now. Because you were willing to speak up." Lenny placed the letter in his lap. He didn't smile, but there was a softness in his face, a softness that hadn't been there for weeks. "You tell your people," Lenny said slowly, "this ain't about recognition. It's about respect. Folks like me, we didn't survive this long just to be treated like suspects in our own hometown." Daniels nodded. "We understand. And we're working on it." Lenny looked out at the trees swaying gently in the breeze beyond his yard. "Just make sure you finish the job." A few minutes later, Daniels left. Lenny stayed on the porch, sipping his coffee, lost in thought. He didn't move for another hour. The next morning, Lenny took the letter and mailed it to his niece in Ohio. He added a note. "I don't need it on the wall. I need it to mean something." That weekend, the town of Reeltown held a small gathering in the park. No banners. No cameras. Just folks coming together. Brenda brought lemonade. Pastor Jensen said a few words. A little boy handed Lenny a homemade card that read, "Thank you for not giving up." Lenny stood under the shade of a pecan tree, looking around. There was laughter. Conversation. Faces he hadn't seen in years. "You think it's really changing?" Brenda asked, stepping beside him. Lenny shrugged. "Change don't come in waves. It comes in drops. You don't see it right away. But over time, the bucket fills." Brenda smiled. "I'll take that." He turned to her. "You're the reason this started rolling. You know. You stood up when it counted." Brenda laughed softly. "You kidding? I was shaking the whole time. Thought they were gonna take my phone and run me off. But you didn't run." They stood in silence for a while, watching the park around them. As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the grass, Lenny sat on a bench. He watched kids tossing a football. A young mother fixing her daughter's braid. 2 teens debating which soda was better. And for once, no one was staring at him. No one was asking questions. They were just living. Maybe that's what he'd fought for all along. Not praise. not awards. Just a world where he could sit in peace, where he didn't have to prove himself to anyone. That night, as Lenny folded his army jacket and placed it on the chair by the door, he looked at the empty spot on the wall where the letter could have gone. He glanced out the window at the dark sky, nodded once, like he was speaking to it, and then turned off the light. Some stories end quietly, but they still echo. Lenny's story wasn't just about what happened. It was about what shouldn't keep happening. And maybe, if we're listening this time, we won't forget so fast. If this story moved you, take a second to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep this conversation going, for Lenny, and for every voice that still hasn't been heard.